Welcome to the FitBUX podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome there as well. We got a special one today. I am always about entrepreneurship. A lot of you guys, from our podcast, we talk about personal financial planning, but my heart's always with entrepreneurship. And I wish, everybody would start businesses and side hustles and do all that type of stuff. And I know it's not for everybody, but I wish everybody would. And today we have a very special guest, one of the most popular people in the world of PT. A lot of you have heard her on her podcast, Miss Karen Litzy. It's a Healthy, Wealthy, Smart podcast. But she's also self-employed. And I'm not going to give away too much. I'll let her start talking about that. But Karen, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. And it's awesome because I get to interview you this time instead of you interviewing me. So it's great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And I know we're doing like the flipped interview because I've interviewed you many times on my podcast. So, again, if people love your work, they should definitely check out some of our interviews because every time I interview you, I feel like I am learning so much more about student loans, and my student loans are paid off.
Yeah.
But I'm always learning and always in amazement at how much value you can bring to people, especially in the PT world.
Yeah. It's on the personal finance side. And everybody's always like, oh, well, you should do business podcasts and stuff. I'm like, no, that's what Karen's for. Like, healthy, wealthy, smart. Let's go do that. But yeah, you have a fantastic podcast. I'll touch on that more in a minute. Before we, dive into that, just let everybody know a little bit about your background, like going through PT school, what you saw coming out. You can even be more local to like where you're living at because of the different settings and all that type of stuff. And just kind of go through your background and how you got to where you're at today.
Sure. So I graduated from Misericordia University from their physical therapy program. And that is in Pennsylvania, kind of outside of the Scranton area. And after I graduated, I first got a job at a hospital in Scranton working in inpatient and skilled nursing facility that was within the hospital. And, when I first graduated, I thought I get a job, I stay at that job, and then I would retire. Like there is no other like in the PT world, I just didn't think that there were any other possibilities for me because nothing had really ever been presented to me that hey, you can do something different. So after a couple of years, I moved to New York City and I started working in a really high end gym in New York City. It was sort of like a country club in the city, is how it was billed. And I would see all of the personal trainers there working at the club, but then they all had their own kind of practice or company on the side where they would go to people's homes. And I thought, well, wait a second. If personal trainers can do this, then so could physical therapists, being outside of your typical home visit or home therapy model. So I've always been seeing people who I do home care, but not for like what one would think is a traditional home care patient. Like my patients, I see a lot of kids. I see people in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, just people who would prefer to have someone come to them. But I got that idea from looking at personal trainers having this business model. And so I started seeing some people on the side. That was my side hustle for many years because I was working full time in an outpatient clinic in New York City. And then I left that job and started working part time for some friends. It's called Physical Therapy Associates of New York. So I was working there. I was working at the Lion King Broadway. So I was the behind the scenes physical therapist for many years at the Lion King. And I was building up my practice on the side. So I basically had like three jobs at the same time. So, it's definitely like a hustle, hustle, hustle. And then finally, I felt comfortable enough to leave my part time job and go all in on my own practice. And that was over 10 years ago because I just wanted to make sure, to your point, coming from the business side of things, like, did I have a sustainable business? Or was it oh, like 1 month I'm just going to make up a number here. I made $10,000. Woohoo, I'm going to quit my job. No, like that's not how it works. Like I'm living in New York City. Like things are expensive here, you know? So and I am one who I'm very risk averse. So I waited till I had a full year of X amount of income per month to know, like, okay, this is not a fluke. It's not like the other shoe's going to drop. Like, cool. I feel comfortable enough that I have a sustainable business because, Joe, I'm sure you've seen, and I know I've seen many people just go out on their own, no safety net, no nothing. And then it's like they realize, oh, wait, this is kind of hard. And,
Hmm.
but I sold all these packages in the first 2 months. Oh, but then I didn't have any cash flow for 3 months. Right. So
Yep.
it's like you cannot run a business if it's not sustainable and you don't have good cash flow coming through and you don't have, I don't know, a little bit of a profit margin to keep yourself going. So that's kind of what I did. And then the podcast sort of got thrown in there at some point, and then I've been doing that for a long time as well.
Yeah, well, that's the first of all, I never knew about the Lion King. That is awesome to hear. Wish we were still doing it. My daughter would be all about
Oh,
like, can we get tickets? Like
it's
we just
so
took,
fun.
yeah, we
It's so
just took
fun.
her to what was it? The Nutcracker, and then
Oh,
also um I don't remember the name of the show. It's like some kids show. They had one, and she loves it now. So she's like, Dad, can we go to Wicked? Can we go to this? I'm like, you can go with your mom.
oh,
Uh,
you should go to The Lion King is so good. And I would tell you, I have heard that show hundreds of times, never gets old. The
yeah,
music never gets old. The stage production is fantastic. It's
yeah,
just so otherworldly, you know? It's a lot of fun. So
that
if you're going to go
that's
to
that
one,
is
I
good.
suggest you go to The Lion King.
Yeah, maybe you just convinced me. We'll
It's
see.
cool.
So, I mean, one of the big things you hit on there, and I want to emphasize this as well, is everybody's always like, I'm going to start a business and, there's going to be cash flowing by this time and this, and this. And it's like, that never happens. I mean, it always takes longer than what you actually think it's
Mhm.
going to. And especially, like you said, selling packages. Oftentimes, you might sell a package. Like, you might sell a good amount the first month or two, but it's probably because of the network you already had and you're
Mhm.
selling to people that you know or have some connection to. Well, that dries up. Like, and you got to go to that next group, that next wave. Where are you
Mhm.
getting that? And that doesn't matter the size of the company or the type of the company. It could be, like what you were doing in your profession as a PT. It could be a,
Mhm.
trainer, whatever it is. I mean, we see the same thing in tech. Like when we started going into physical therapist, like we expanded and then it flatlines because there's like, well, we went to our network, now what? And it's like trying to go into those other industries. It doesn't just happen overnight. So if you have these projections like, hey, this is gonna happen this fast, no, you got to put some curve to that.
Yeah.
But on the self-employed front, like if you had to drill it down just to one thing, for example, that you learned, like, okay, this was probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give from a business standpoint, what would that be?
Well, I'll give two. One is, well, I'm going to give three. One is find a good mentor, someone you trust, someone who has your best interests at heart. Doesn't have to be a physical therapist, right? It could be someone outside of physical therapy. That would be number one. Number two, find a group of people. I'm in within two entrepreneurial groups. One is a peer to peer group that I connected with through the private practice section. And we started a couple of years ago, and now we meet once a month. And then we have a Slack channel that we can put in, some of the things that we need help with. And that's great. And then I have a completely other entrepreneurial group of women here in New York City, and we meet in person once a month. And that none of them are physical therapists, but I always learn so much because some of them went to business school,
Yeah.
right? and have this training. So that's two pieces of advice. And my third piece of advice, and something that I um found so helpful and was so instrumental in me for me to really repackage my business and also make a shift in my mindset, was joining Goldman Sachs's 10,000 small business program. And I mean, I've mentioned this so many times on the podcast and even at the private practice section meeting um, this last year, joining, not joining, but being accepted, because you have to apply to be part of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program. Applying for it was difficult. Being accepted it's basically like a little mini MBA.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Like you're putting in 15 hours a week, probably, of work. But I felt like when I entered the Goldman Sachs program, that I was a physical therapist who happened to own a business. And when I left the program a few months later, I was a business owner that happened to be a physical therapist. And so to have that shift in mindset was really big. And then plus, you make all these amazing connections, and they kind of teach you how to take advantage of business opportunities in your area, because the
Yep.
small business program is broken up into areas. So there's a New York one. I'm sure there's several in Texas. I'm sure they're in California, they're in Denver, they're all over. Um, so you meet people in your area, you learn how to take advantage of programs in your area. Um, and they really taught me how to take a better look at my financials, which is important, instead of just gliding by, like knowing like I'm making money. But like in the beginning, I didn't know what my cash flow was. I wasn't looking at profit and loss statements every month. I wasn't looking at my what am I spending, like line by line, and then realizing, wait, why am I spending money on this? I don't need to do this. Why am I spending? I don't need to do this, right? Or like there's like 1 month for me, it's usually in September, where my spending is really, really high. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, oh, because that's when I pay for the whole year for my disability insurance.
Yep.
Right. So it's like, here it is in September, but I'm paying up front for the year. So you have to then kind of break that apart throughout the rest of the year. So it's like it makes you look at things and, number one, not freak out because, oh my gosh, why did I make so much money? You're like, oh yeah, right. And number two, it teaches you how to just be more aware of your financial situation every single month.
Yeah, absolutely. And to highlight two of the key things there and actually just expand on them. You brought up the mentors. And I always highly encourage people get mentors outside of your industry, just
Mm-hmm.
because it's almost like if you work with people inside your industry, it's almost like an echo chamber. Like they're going to tell you the same things, and they're not looking at it from a consumer standpoint that's looking at your product. They're looking at it from the professional standpoint. Like if you're a PT, they're looking at it from the PT standpoint. And what would PTs want? And the best I could do is relate this to finance because that's what I'm in. So like when we're building our technology, like I have to constantly tell some of our finance guys I work with their engineers, like we don't need that level of detail. We don't need like, yes, I get that's like the most perfect thing in our minds. That's what we would want to be perfect. But the user doesn't give a shit. Like we don't need that. All right. And so you don't get that from a mentor unless they're outside of the industry and they can really look at you and critique it like, why does this matter? This is not what I want. Like, and then the other side of that with the mentors, like you brought up like the Goldman Sachs stuff and everything, and some of the business people in New York. Make sure they actually know what they're talking about and that they're mentors and that they just didn't read a book and then repackage it online and claim that it's theirs. Like I see that crap especially in the PT industry. I see that crap
Totally.
all over the place. Like make sure the person actually has a background of actually running like a big business and knows what the hell they're talking about. Like that's a big one. So
Yeah.
definitely glad you brought that up. The other thing that you brought up is like when you're going through line by line, what am I spending this money on? What am I spending this money on? What do I need this? I like to talk a lot about efficiencies and
Mm-hmm.
different type of like programs in the, in the PT world, it can be anywhere from like EMR systems to billing systems to just having a calendar being organized. Like, what have you found in different areas of your business that you use personally to help just really streamline things, make your life more efficient? And by the way, sometimes those of you that are listening, efficiency doesn't necessarily mean lower costs. It might mean also time savings, even though you might be paying
Right.
a little bit more. So just
Right.
what are some of the tools and the products out there that you found really useful?
Yeah. So the main thing for the physical therapy side of things was I switched EMRs to Jane. And full disclosure, I'm also like an ambassador for Jane, but I'm an ambassador for Jane because I love it. Like I love them. I was referring people to Jane before I was ever an ambassador for Jane, you know? But when I switched over to Jane, again, it's simple, it's easy. I am like a simple person. I liked things to be very easy. I don't like a million different clicks and checks and all this stuff. Like, give me easy and I'm in. And so when I switched to Jane, the reason I like Jane is because my calendar's on there. It sends reminders out to my patients. It could be email or text, which is great. So again, speaking of being efficient, like I don't have to send out reminder emails. They go out when the appointment is made and then the day before. Awesome. Um, all of my billing goes through there. So for me, I have a cash based practice. Patients leave a credit card on file. So every day I know I'm charging that card when I'm seeing them. I send my super bills straight to the patient through that, versus going into Word and making up a super bill in a Google Workspace with my signed BAA. So it's HIPAA compliant, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So Jane obviously is HIPAA compliant as well. And they also have, you could do your telehealth through there. So there's a lot. And then, as we were talking about reports, Jane also has really easy to read reports. So at the end of the month, you can go in and say, how many patient visits did I have? Did it match what my KPI goal is? And if
Yep.
it didn't, why not? Right. So if it doesn't match, I might be like, like, why didn't it match? And I look and say, oh, I was at the PPS meeting for a week. So maybe that's why. That's why this month was a little bit lower. I was sick. Here in New York City, right? Everybody's got the flu, right? Everybody's sick. So it's not as many, maybe instead of seeing, 6 or 7 patients a day, I'm seeing 4 or 5. Right. And you get that very, very easily. And then when patients are like, oh, do you have, did I see you on this day? It's really easy to look back and find it. And then it also connects with PhysiTrack. So right before we came on, actually, I was doing home exercise programs, sent it to my patients. And not only that, but then it goes directly into their chart. So
Yep.
it's like done. You're not having to do all of this redundant work because it's all done for you. So switching to Jane was huge for me. And my patients like it. They
Yep.
get the paperwork ahead of time. They love it. They love getting the exercises. It's easy for them to take the super bills and turn it into their insurance company. So, all in all, has definitely made me more efficient. And also, it makes me look very professional. It's
Yep.
not like I'm some, like, I don't know, mom and pop shop, nothing, you know what I mean? But like this unsophisticated business, it makes it look like you've got your, what together,
Yep.
and patients appreciate that. So that's what I use on the PT side. On the podcast side of things, I mean, it's a whole host of stuff. Like so much stuff that I use. I use swellai.com for all of the podcasts. It gives me all of my show notes, keywords, social media posts, etc. I just started a couple of months ago using Opus Clips, which is OPUS,
Mhm.
for all of my video needs. So you put it in, you clip it out, you can set up your templates to match with your branding, and it will chunk apart your full. So let's say we're recording this right now. Opus Clips will take it and make it into 2 minute or less reels using an SEO kind of monitor to know which one will do best on social media. Like which one of these. It's cool. I love it. And so, because before I would do it and try
Yeah.
and like cut the video. Oh my God. I mean, can you imagine? Like, what was I thinking? So now all of this stuff that I do for the podcast takes me like less than a half an hour, and it's edited, it's up, and it's done along with Canva. And I just started using a new accounting system. So instead of using QuickBooks, which is quite expensive, $80, $90 a month, plus for my needs, it's a little too robust.
Yeah.
Like I'm not using any of it. Their customer service is not very helpful. I mean, let's be
Sucks.
honest. Yeah, I didn't want to go there, but yeah, kind of sucks. So I have switched to a new accounting system called Cashflowy .ai. And Cashflowy is an AI driven bookkeeping system. And I was an early adopter because one of my mentors, Selena Sue, is involved in this project. And Selena is someone that I trust implicitly, right? She's very let's say she doesn't put her name on something if she doesn't believe in it, you know?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I like those kind of people. So I sort of signed on to Cashflowy as like an original uh member, if you will. And they've been just great. So they're still, working out some bugs here and there, but I have access to an accountant or anytime I want for the rest of my time with Cashflowy.
Yeah.
I can just make an appointment. So a couple of weeks ago, the accountant, myself, and two assistants from Cashflowy were literally going line by line, making sure every single line was categorized correctly. Because, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but if you categorize things correctly, your taxes will be more accurate and it may save you money.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Right. I mean, I don't have to, this. I'm preaching to the choir.
Not only,
So
not only save you money now, but it could save you fines from the IRS later.
that's right. That's right. So it's like I started using Cashflowy, and so far I'm really happy with it. And again, like I had said earlier, like I am a simple person. I like to look at simple, easy to read charts. So when I look at like my profit margins, I was like, oh wow, cool. Like this
Yeah.
is very cool. Like I had made like a profit, but a nice size profit, and it just it like this is your cash flow. This is, and I have to say, so far I'm really enjoying it. I don't know if they're taking new people on right now until they work out all the bugs, but I'm okay with that. I'm
Yeah.
okay with a couple of bugs right now, because now when I go through it line by line with the accountant, I understand why everything is categorized the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I got,
Mind blown.
yeah, the accounting piece. I mean, that's a major expense. I mean, we're always talking about, I always joke around with our board. I'm like, why do we have bookkeepers and stuff? Because, I mean, first of all, like QuickBooks, it's hard to set up, but we have to pay for QuickBooks and then we also pay for a bookkeeper. And I'm the opposite problem, like, because I come from the financial world of reading financial statements all day long.
Right.
And our bookkeepers and accountants know that. So instead of them actually doing stuff, they come to me and ask me the questions
Oh,
about,
that's
and
funny.
I'm like, guys, like, figure this out. Like, why are we paying you?
Why are we
Like, I
paying
don't
you?
want to do this. I don't want to be an accountant.
Right. Well, and that's like what Cashflowy's ultimate goal is they're your bookkeeper. Like
Yeah.
you don't need a bookkeeper because you have Cashflowy.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
was like,
AI,
oh, I like the
that's,
sound of that.
you know what's funny is you brought that up. I literally went on to ChatGPT the other day and had it actually give me a business step by step to build out an AI bookkeeper. Like, so now I don't have to make it myself. I could go use them, right? So that's
Yeah.
perfect.
So those are just a couple of things. And I use like Claude and ChatGPT and things like that on the AI front too. As one of my podcast guests said, to 5 times, 10 times, 100 times my brain.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
so I do use that to like help. I'm kind of auditing my website. So I'm going
Hmm.
page by page and taking some things out and creating completely new copy for every single page.
Yep.
So
Yep. And
I'm,
I have done the same thing. So I completely
yeah.
understand what you're
So,
going through.
I'm using some of the AI tools to give me some ideas and then I'll write it. Like I take what I have, put it in, rewrite it, rewrite it, rewrite it.
Yep.
Um, oh, but yes, it's a journey.
Yep. And that's what I always joke around though, because ChatGPT always gives you a positive answer. And so it's like, okay, well, what about this? It's like, oh, well, I actually have to compare those. So if you guys are using AI, make sure that you understand how to do prompts. Like that's like the big
Yes.
thing. Like prompt engineering is massive right now. Like make sure you know how to do a right prompt. So that way you get out what you're gonna get. So
Yes, and like I had this discussion on the podcast with the guests actually coming out tomorrow from when we're recording this, but we were talking about the prompts. And like now, you can prompt and you can say, rewrite. You could take your current copy of your website, put it in and say, please rewrite the following copy for my website. You can't just period that. You have to say, I am an expert physical therapist. The audience for this section, right? Let's say it's pediatric sports injuries. The audience is parents
yep.
of children experiencing pain or an injury, et cetera, right? Because it's not the kids that are looking, but it's the parents of the kids. And then you can say, write it in the voice of Joe Reinke
Yep.
or write it in the voice of, I don't know, the most famous advertising professional ever to live. Like you can find that name, and they'll write it in that person's voice. And then you take it. And of course, you take, like, what I usually do is take a couple sentences and obviously put in my own and, try and make it sound more like me, like what I wanted to. But it's really cool if you know how to do the right prompts. But if you don't know how to do the right prompts, you're going to get a really bland, boring, generic
Oh yeah.
copy.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Completely agree on that. But yeah, I mean, you brought up a number of different companies. All of them are fantastic. I'm actually glad that you brought up Jane. So we get asked all the time because we have a lot of partners from a personal finance standpoint. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast about the business side of it, I want to do more entrepreneurship in it because I get a lot of people asking me about entrepreneurship questions, and we never had a business partner. And actually, one of the podcasts that we were on, you brought up Jane and you introduced me to them, and I started going through their stuff. And so Jane's now a partner of ours too, for the entrepreneurs. We haven't announced it yet. I think the announcement actually goes out like next week.
Nice.
But I'll put that in the show notes as well for you guys. You guys get like a month free with the FitBUX coupon code, like, or if you tell them you come from FitBUX, so you can try it out. But speaking of AI, one of the things they just told me yesterday is like they have AI note taking where it's like you can have the app open while you're with your patient and it will
Yep.
transcribe your notes for you. Like
Yep.
to me, that is awesome because my wife, those of you again that don't know, my wife's a PT. She always complains about that, and I hear OTs and SLPs and everybody else complaining about it too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an awesome feature, a great time saving feature. So.
Yeah. And it's not expensive either. I think it's
Mhm.
like an extra $20 a month or something. Whereas a lot of the external ones that might coordinate with them are at least around 100, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So,
Uh, Now, on the business side again, I mean, we talked about some of the different things like that you've learned. If you had to say, what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made that you're
oh
like,
my
oh
God.
crap, I know I made a lot. I make them every day,
Yeah.
but like the biggest one that's like I learned from that. What would you say that one mistake was?
The biggest one was not having a good lawyer and a good accountant right off the bat.
Yeah,
That's it. Number one mistake. Trying to think, I can do this on my own. You can't. You
no,
cannot. It almost cost me a lot of money. Luckily, I have a friend that's a lawyer and helped me immensely get out of this little pickle. But it was like once I got a good lawyer and a good accountant, things became so much easier. So, like, you can't do it yourself.
Yeah.
You just can't, you
Yeah.
know?
Especially on the legal side, and especially if you're having like partners and that type of stuff, it could get,
Yeah.
you need to have some good stuff on that side of the world.
Yeah,
Make
you
sure you're
need to
protected.
have good contracts for physical therapists out there. It's kind of important that you have your lawyer write out all of like the terms and conditions on your website and the legal paperwork that your patients need to sign. Like it's not the best idea to just copy and paste someone else's. Like you really should have a lawyer do yours individually. It makes quite a difference.
Yep.
Um, so that was probably the number one biggest mistake I made. And that was, 12 plus years ago because I didn't know any better. I was like a dum dum. So now, like, I wouldn't even dream of it,
Yep.
of doing this without a lawyer and an accountant to help me, to help guide me through.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you brought up the podcast,
Mhm.
and like you said, like you have your own business. The podcast is kind of like part of that business. But
Yep.
I hear, especially new grads all the time, or some of these people in the world of PT that are like, start your own business, like do a podcast, make money off of it, like start a blog, make money off it, start YouTube, make money off of it, and they want to tell you how easy it is. Talk a little bit about your journey with the podcast, like, just some of the policies that you've seen that you see on social media all the time that it's like, yeah, guys, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to start a podcast, you're going to start a blog, or you're going to start a YouTube channel, you should start it because you want to. You should start it because you have a good idea. You should start it because you want to create good content that's going to help people instead of start this so you'll make money.
Yep.
Like the two, it just does not work because if you're in it only for the money, people are going to see right through that, and it's not going to feel authentic. It's not going to feel like you're doing it with the consumer in mind, but you're doing it with yourself in mind. And there's a difference, and that energy is there,
Yep.
you know? So, I mean, I think if you want to start any of those things, like go for it. And I think now, I mean, I started the podcast over a decade ago, right? So back then, the tools that are available now just weren't available, right? So starting all of those things now is certainly a lot easier from a technology standpoint,
Yep.
you know, but you still have to treat it like, if you want to make money from it, you have to treat it like a business, right? So you need to have
Yep.
a plan, you need to have a mission, you should have a vision, you should want to know where you want to go with it. Um, but I just think like it's a it's hard work. And to just say, put it up, you'll make money immediately. Maybe you will. I don't know. I'm not going to say you're not.
Yep.
You might be the exception to the rule of that person who has like one incredible viral moment and then you're, off to the races. Maybe. I don't even know if one viral moment does it anymore. I don't think
Too
that
much
it does.
noise.
Yeah,
Too
there's
much
too much.
noise.
Right. So, and I think that's a great point. There's so much noise right now that if you're going to start any one of those, whether it be a podcast, a blog, or a YouTube channel, or all of the above, you really have to have a distinct point of view, you
Hmm.
know, not to sound like Nina Garcia on Project Runway. And for those who watch Project Runway, you'll know exactly what I mean, because her biggest thing is when these designers, their creations are coming down the runway, if they don't have a point of view, they're eliminated.
Yeah.
It's that simple. She's like, if you don't have a point of view, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know? So I would encourage you to have a point of view.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And it's like, first of all, like what you said about passion, and this is something about like you want to have to do this and not for money. I say that about everything, even if it's a W-2 job, like you're gonna burn out it, even if it's a W-2 job and you don't like what you're doing. And on the entrepreneurial side, it's 1,000 times worse than if you're W-2'd because, dealing with the ups and downs. I mean, I joke around with everybody every day. They're like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "It's 8 a.m. Like, ask me at 9. I'll be in a different mood." Like, just because of the ups and downs, more psychological than anything. So if you
Mhm.
don't have the passion behind what you're doing, you're not going to follow through with it. And then, to your point, getting attention, like that's the biggest thing, especially if you're going to social media route, is how are you going to get attention? Like you're competing with so much nowadays.
Yeah.
And, what I don't like is, some of these guys, they're telling people, oh, you can make like 10 to 20 grand a month. Yeah, that's
Sure.
120 to 240 grand with the amount of work you end up putting into it. That's not that much money. And then what they also don't tell them is that you are the business. So it's not like I create a technology and then I can sell it to somebody else. Like when you're a podcast, when
Right.
you're a blog, when you're a YouTube channel, you are the business. And so you can't just sell it because you're not going with it. And
Right.
so if you decide I don't want to do this anymore, it's almost worthless.
Okay.
Like
Well,
so
it's like,
it's
yeah,
like
if Joe Rogan was like, I'm not going to do the podcast anymore, but someone else is going to do it, but it's still going to be called the Joe Rogan Show.
yeah.
It's like, well, that's not going to work. And I only use that example because it's a popular podcast. You could say the same of like Kylie Kelsey, who
Hmm.
happened to knock Joe Rogan off the top of the podcast world when her podcast debuted, right?
Yep.
But like if she decides years from now, I'm not going to do it
No,
anymore, but my best friend Jennifer is going to do it.
it
People
doesn't
be
make
like,
any sense.
okay, that's weird.
Yeah, and that's one of the big reasons because I knew like when we started FitBUX, we were like, our main channel, we're gonna go straight to consumers. Our main channel is gonna be social media. It's organic, it's cheaper, like we don't have any money, that's what we're starting with. And in the world of finance, this is huge. Like guys put their names all over everything. I'll use Dave Ramsey, right? Like Dave Ramsey. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm actually putting a company name on it for that purpose.
Right.
Like if I don't want to do podcasts anymore and anything, it's like, well, if it's a FitBUX channel, somebody else can do it. But like Dave Ramsey, he's talked a lot about transitioning and how the companies stand alone. And it's like, well, it's still called Dave Ramsey Financial Solutions. Like a
Right.
lot of people listen to your show because of Dave Ramsey, not because of this other guy. Like
Right.
when you actually do retire, there's going to be a fall off. So that's the big thing. I just ran into that actually at CSM. Those of you that aren't PTs that don't know what CSM is, CSM is like the biggest conference of PTs every year. It was just last week. And I ran into probably 5 or 6 people that had blogs or podcasts or something like that. And they're like, man, like I built this thing up. I'm making 200, 300 grand a year at it. I just don't want to do it anymore. And I can't sell it. Like, I can't make any money off of it. What can I do to like get this out, Joe? Because those of you that don't know, I used to be in like M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and all that type of stuff. And it's like, you can't. Like, you are the business. Sorry. So yeah, I can go off on tangents on that stuff all day long. But we're running up on about 35, 40 minutes on the podcast. Start wrapping it up. What if there's any final words of advice that we haven't touched on already?
Mhm.
What would be let's break this up into different age groups. Let it be, a student, a new grad coming out, someone that's 10 years out that is like, I've been a staff PT and or staff OT or staff PA, and I want to do something different now. Like, what would you give advice to each one of those individuals when it comes to the entrepreneurship side of the healthcare world?
I mean, I can kind of give the same advice to each group. Because they may need to revise this as they matriculate from student to new grad to mid career towards end of career. And that is take stock of who you are. So not what are your business goals, but what is your like life plan?
Yep.
Who are you? So what are your as a person? What are your values as a person? And what are you willing to sacrifice or not sacrifice in order to further your career or your life in whichever direction you want to take it? And this plan, life plan or you plan, the you business plan versus your business plan is going to change from a student, new grad, mid-career towards end of career, because important things in your life change. So for example, when I do my business plan, or for the year, let's say, I always put in, it's not just I want to have these business KPIs, visits per month or revenue or net profit, etc. I also put in watch at least 2 movies a week, because I love watching movies and they make me happy. Right. So what makes you happy? You have to put that into your plan, whether you're in school, whether you're working as a staff PT. If you don't have those areas that are clearly defined of what makes you happy, then it's you're going to get frustrated. It may lead to burnout. You're going to be cranky. You're not going to be working at your best. So for me, it's 2 movies a week. It's also get together with one of my friends once a week. Like that is a non negotiable
Yep.
for me, because I know it takes me out of work. It makes me happy. And then I can focus on work when I'm in it.
Yep.
So, think about those areas of your life that make you happy, and it's going to change as you grow. But they should be your non-negotiables,
Yep.
right? Like if you have plans with a friend, and another patient wants to squeeze into your schedule, like I no, I'm sorry, I can't. I have plans.
Yep.
I don't have the time that day. It's a non-negotiable. And so for me, if it means, well, missing out on a little bit of money versus keeping my head in the right place, I will always choose keeping my head in the right place.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's crazy that you brought that up. One of the things that we have on our drawing board this year, starting mostly in the second quarter and third quarter, is more financial wellness from a mental standpoint. And I literally just got done recording this morning a podcast and video. What you just described, I call character building. And I always say, like, we live in a movie, like life is a movie itself. Like we are all characters in it. And either you develop that character or somebody else is directing you and you're unconsciously going through life as that character. So how we portray ourselves to other people, how do other people look at us? And so I
Mhm.
literally just recorded a podcast on that. And like those areas you hit, I call them the 5 core competencies. It's like it's health, it's family, it's relationships, it's your persona, like how you dress, and then it's the last part is wealth and business. Like that's the last part. Like those are the first 4 parts are actually the more necessity part.
Right,
That's what you should be
right.
focusing on. And so that podcast I think is going to come out probably in the next week or two. Um, but the bigger thing around that, and I started working on this early last year, and I stopped because I had a lot of just between like FitBUX and personal stuff. I just had too much going on last year. But we started building out a financial wellness app that does exactly that. Like from a behavioral standpoint, to sit down and say, in the morning, what were those 5 core competencies? At night, how did I achieve them? What did I do? So that might be coming out by the end of this year too. So keep an eye on that. Well, Karen, it's always great. Definitely as more topics come up, I might even have you on again to just deeper dive into different
Mhm.
areas and stuff. It's always fantastic talking to you. For those of you listening to the show, be sure to subscribe, leave your reviews, comments, tell your friends about it, share us. Come on to FitBUX, get help with your finances. It's always a pleasure, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.